by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne. Right along here with Ransom Godwin every Thursday night, 10 p.m. to midnight. Thank you for joining us. Wow, what an incredible evening it has been. And the week and the days just seem to blow by, and just more absurdness by the second. So in tonight's program, the new 50 in 5 has been launched by the World Economic Forum, Bill Gates, and the Rockefeller Foundation. Sounds like an advertisement, just rolls off the lips, doesn't it? Okay, are we going to go through the same thing again?
Thank you for listening to Revolution.Radio.
Listen to the clock.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.
Okay, same thing like last time. We're going to have to listen to a couple minutes of ads as this starts the hour here. This happened last week, too. There was an overlay for like 4 minutes into the first hour of ads that jumped in, double repeating from the last
real natural love
roll out of the show.
You enjoy interviews with amazing guests.
We'll see what kind of ads come on in, but as we stay with
every
us
Monday night
for this next minute or two
6 p.m.
here.
Eastern Standard Time, right here on Revolution Radio. Studio A, freedomslips.com. Crypt Risk -thinking. Welcome to the crypt.
Sounds scary, doesn't it?
Wait for the kids show one.
It is no secret that the so-called mainstream media is best described as controlled propaganda. Countless news stories are either totally ignored or spun with half-truths, and because of this, essential facts and vital information are often compromised. Join Dr. Ott every Friday night on Studio B at 10 p.m. Eastern and learn why The Story Behind the Story was nominated for a Peabody Award in its second year of producing unparalleled broadcasting excellence in 1997. That is, if you really care about learning the truth.
The Secret Kindergarten is here for the young children of the world.
All right,
the
Stevie.
best program on the radio for kids, dealing with the most important topics in the whole universe. Fairy tales,
Yay!
music and movement,
All right.
numbers, plants, animals, fun,
Wow.
colors, insects. Take care and cast your ears out to catch a story
It's a
from the
book.
world of other young
It's a
things.
book.
Reach out, up, under, and over. Sing a song. Talk about feelings. Just remember the magic word. The magic word is no. Step on into the Secret Kindergarten.
Magic word is hang with us
Saturdays,
until
2
the
p.m.
advertisements
to
are
3
finished.
p.m.
We'll get on to the
Eastern
show
time,
sometime.
right here on Revolution Radio.
We're an anarcho-syndicalist commune. We take it in turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week. Yes. But all the decisions of that officer have to be ratified at a special bi-weekly meeting. Yes, I see. By a simple majority in the case of purely internal affairs. Be quiet. But by a 2/3 majority in the case of more... Be quiet. I order you to be quiet. Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look! just a flesh wound.
I don't believe I've seen such a display of courage, skill, nerve, grace, and stupidity.
I'll do you for that. What? Come here. What are you going to do, bleed on me? I'm invincible. You're a loony. The Black Knight always triumphs.
Roundtable Live, Monday through Friday, 1 a.m. till 4 a.m. Eastern Time. Bring your mind, bring your ideas, bring your voice. King Arthur had nothing on us here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. All right, thanks for listening while we take that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
Was that a we're on finally live here? Yay.
Yes.
All right. Well, let me get back to the intro. Ransom, thank you for everybody else for waiting. I think there's something wrong with the station. It's double playing ads after the end of the hour straight in for like 8 straight minutes. Not really sure what's going on there. But you're going to want to wait for this new 50 and 5. Something's happened where they need to speed up the timeline. Not sure exactly what's happening. Now, it could have been Betelgeuse going micronova and sending cosmic rays along with the declining magnetic field on our planet, where we're going to get a psychic awareness and humans are going to perceive reality differently and see through the dark auras and black auras around these creatures and these evil elite, and we'll see it for what it really is. There's a new program out called 50 and 5, and what they want to do in the top 50 countries have digital identity, central bank digital currencies, vaccine passports, and everything rolled up with social credit score in 5 years in 50 of the top nations, obviously the 50 top economies of the planet. So they're going to start with the most wealthy that have the most tech first, and then they're going to slide on down the scale. So, meaning you're going to need to be more reliant on your own food production. So I wanted to talk about meat prices tonight because we did 2 things. We got a lamb this week that they slaughtered at the Amish house, and then we came back and butchered ourselves. And we also got a full hog, maybe about 250 pounds, and we'll be picking that up tomorrow. They're going to be smoking it. So I'll go through some prices of, what it is per pound plus the smoking costs. Also, if you do look around, it does seem that there's vast signals in the sky beyond what they're trying to do with HAARP and creating artificial aurora in the atmosphere. So for 4 straight days, they've been pumping out HAARP and creating green auroras in Alaska for 4 straight days. I'm wondering what it might be doing in a regional basis in terms of weather and how people might be feeling with all those electric waves or electromagnetic energy pulsing the atmosphere. But one thing, I know Ransom and I had sent a few questions and query back and forth is, Citizens Bank has gone down, and bank over in England is now teetering. And it's just, at what point does the banking system start to lock up here? Because you saw what happened. It was a soft, so we've talked about this before. On like a Friday, they're going to call a bank holiday, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or a whole week of the next week, you won't be able to access funds. But what did we see last Friday? For at least a good half or 3/4 of the day, nobody was able to access their money. Online banking, ACH transfers, payroll, direct deposit, none of it worked. So that was kind of a soft banking holiday, and a lot of people freaked out. I mean, freaked, because people are so scraping by. And we'll look at some world food pricing tonight. We're talking about food prices possibly, I'm just saying possibly here. Searches for cost of groceries now at an all-time high off Google Trends, both in the U.S. and worldwide. So something's happening there. And this is the Grow Intelligence had warns global food crisis much worse than 2008. They are looking at absolutely another Arab Spring as we get disconnected and discombobulated and the oil stops flowing through the Straits of Hormuz and things get cut off in the Suez Canal. They are trying to game this out as Event 201, how that would have affected, Event 201, we're going to tread carefully on this one, was a tabletop exercise to see what would happen if indeed some sort of viral component had swept the planet Well, this is going to be an Arab Spring food shortage desktop exercise after the oil stops. So it gets a little bizarre in tonight's episode. But really, when they try to push us to the central bank digital currencies and they try to take control of your life in the 50 and 5, you can absolutely say no. And that's what we really want to talk about tonight is, could we have a campaign of noncompliance? And we have the right to say no. It's your right. It's everybody's right to just say no. We don't want to partake in this madness. So just say no. Ransom?
Yeah, but it's going to be really cool. So we're going to give up our, generational wealth and traditional freedom of thought and movement and all of that. But we'll get these neat little, timepieces that show us what's going on our skin because, so we could get tracked and be part of the system. I've been looking at this. Everything in the headlines just tells me, man, they are so close to the drain. It's been going around, at least for the U.S. and the Western world. We're floating the drain right now, and they just haven't decided exactly which cue or which trigger to use to just sink it. But all over, I'm looking at just, the food situation is starting to look bad, especially and it's not even, we're not even to the point of, there not being enough food or something. It's that they keep using these excuses and reasons to manipulate the food market. Like while you were talking about the beef shortages, I was looking at this article. Beef prices hit record high as southwestern U.S. recovers from the worst dry spell in 1,200 years.
Oh, come on, dude.
Dude, for real, man. That's what it is. No, they're giving this blame right here. And it has nothing to do with the fact that they destroyed, I don't know how many millions of cattle and stuff in previous years before that. And not to mention that there is no drought, right? So the beef should be growing great from last year to this year in the Southwest, record number snowpacks, all of that stuff going on. So there's no drought. There should have been plenty of food for them to eat all summer. But remember, they were trying to convince us that cows were dropping dead in the middle of Kansas because of 90-degree weather. You can see an attack on all fronts. And they just have these reasons. And I think this is a cue. Here's a article from Reuters. As crisis deepens, Cubans scramble to migrate by any means. And that kind of leads you to what I think is the next phase because, I'm not taking sides in any of these conflicts. We don't really have beef in the game, so to speak, except for the fact that the people that run our systems have intermingled and intertwined these systems. So it's like you can't get away from it at this point. It would be nice if we just could say, no thanks. And that's what we should have been doing for the last 20 years. As our government has been the tool of the central banks destabilizing the world in preparation for what I think is this exact event. But anyway, this article talks about people from Cuba scrambling to migrate. And if you look what's going on in the Middle East, there are going to be not just millions of displaced people, but hundreds of millions of displaced people. But don't worry about it. They already have a plan for that. They're going to move them into Europe, move them into the United States. Now, you can say what you want about which side you're on, but it's hard to argue that when conflicting cultures are forced to live together, their problems happen after that. But you know what? It's just in time for the $900 grocery cart that you barely got enough food to feed everybody for a month. And that's what people are really complaining about. So they're going to have to start pulling out a lot of excuses out of their butt. And then when you look all across the board, shipping giant lays off another 10,000 as pandemic booms turns bust. And I don't know about you, but I don't remember any pandemic boom. Actually, it was quite the opposite, wasn't it? There was supply shortages and fears of bigger supply shortages. And, so we're going to flood the Western world with people simultaneously cutting off the people that I guess you could say have the inherited right of each country they live in. So they're just going to get cut off. And here's a good example of that. Oregon just dropped all graduation standards failing all of its students in the name of equity. They're not really failing their students. It's quite opposite. That's a little disingenuous. Actually, they're letting everybody go out into the world as if they had the skills and the know-how just from basic standards of high schools and colleges. They're just getting rid of those so that people basically are going to come out of these institutions not only indoctrinated, but complete morons. And, so it's just in time. I mean, like, all of this stuff is weirdly, precisely going at the same time. And there has to be a crescendo at some point, the actual plug getting pulled out so that the reset can take effect. And that's what you're seeing all over everywhere that I'm looking at. They tell us that the elections are great, yet, here's a headline: judge orders new primary election in Connecticut, but don't think too hard in that, because they say that doesn't happen. Apple stock dips after a week of outlook. I'm not really into Apple, but when Apple's doing bad, the whole economy's doing bad. And then you got all of these people trying to escalate every, I'd say, negative thing that's going on in the world. It's being escalated. And it almost is as if we're little petri discs getting exposed to new circumstances just to see what will happen. And we're going to take to the sky with electric planes, but you sent me this slide that was talking about how commercial travel is almost dead. And if you take a look at the map right here, so this shows you how shut off and cut off at least Americans are. So this is a map from the travel.state.government that shows all of the travel restrictions in the world. And we are not wanted anywhere. Our own government is telling us, you know what, you better not go there. If you could just look at the whole thing from Mexico, from the southern border of the United States, almost all of Central America, South America, with the exception of Argentina, and then almost all of Africa, with the exception of a few countries in South Africa area, but not South Africa themselves, just countries in the southern portion of the continent, all of Europe. And these are supposed to be mostly our allies here in Europe, and the complete Middle East, Russia, China, everywhere. So it makes you wonder, why is that? And are they doing the same thing worldwide? It's like it's the shutdown. And we've talked about this before. So you have several issues going on with traveling, right? Travel restrictions. I'm sure some of the fear is pumped up beyond, and other places it's downplayed, right? So I wouldn't put too much faith in this, travel advisory map, but it does point out the fact that we're not really liked or wanted anywhere, and that has a lot to do with what's going on in the world. But think about this: there's planes that are falling apart. There is pilots with iffy health issues, if you know what I mean. There are people advocating for the skies to be completely taken over by AI, and it seems like there's a common thread here, not only from the holy religious war that's going on, and you can say what you want, but that's what it is. So if you're not a party to one of those dogmas, then we're in some serious trouble, because we still have to deal with millions and millions of people that are part of that dogma. And, if you know the idea of dogmas, people are willing to kill and die for these ideas. So we're in a precarious situation as far as the world goes, because, most of the world sees us as a more atheistic, degenerate country. From what I know, that's my own personal opinion, talking to people from other countries and their view on us here. And they really think we're morons, which, with the headline I just showed you, where we're dropping standards and just letting kids go through school because of one reason or another. You can say what you want about the reasoning behind it, but the end result is pretty obvious. It's a socialized education where everyone doesn't know anything. A nation of morons, the idiocracy in action. And then you go back to the traveling thing. So it's dangerous to travel. It's expensive to travel. It's torturous to travel on the commercial lines, right? They've made it the most uncomfortable, rushing stress involved and experience that you could possibly have to go to an airport, make your flight, get through the security, go to the other country, do it again when you come back, and then do it again when you get here. You're not greeted as, a citizen when you get back here. If you've ever traveled overseas and you come back, it's not the going over there that usually is the, or at least in my experience leaving, it's not the problem. It's coming back. You get treated like some kind of criminal. Because you were coming into the U.S. Meanwhile, our southern border is wide open. I mean, I can do whatever I want. I can take an ATV. I can crisscross it. There's people doing it out there. There's trains of migrants walking through the desert. And nobody really cares about that because that's part of the plan. And it brings me back to the purpose of these wars right now. They are going to move hundreds of millions of people on top of the hundreds of millions of people that have already migrated out of these areas. So whatever's going on at the world government level, they are clearing out the Middle East. They are clearing out Central America for some kind of new situation there, a new situation. And I think that has something to do with the fact that they have plans for smart cities, giant aquifers being tapped, giant grow zones being built. And the rest of the world is being crammed into little areas where they scream about diversity being the strength. But as you can plainly see throughout Europe and other places, it doesn't seem to work when cultures clash, when they're purposely put together, when everyone knows that they're at odds. And that's exactly what's going on. They're not going to put people that, have the same ideas next to each other as far as migrants go. And it's always been funny to me that, we should have been taking in my opinion, everybody from Venezuela when it turned socialist and saving their lives and doing kind of what we say that we're about. And we would have let all of those people in as, I went brain dead there, refugees from actual place where they were in danger. But instead, we closed it off to them and then opened it up for everyone else that is not in danger. They just don't like where they live. And there's so many programs here designed to destroy the overall system here. It's being drained beyond capacity on purpose. And that's why it seems like they're switching everybody that they can over from the idea of working. Because if you know a little bit about social media right now, one of the biggest fads that's going on is Generation X and the younger generation of millennials complaining about 40-hour work weeks or 8-hour days having to work and realizing that they're going to work. They're making so-and-so amount of money. When they get their check, it's not there. The government takes most of it in the form of tax. And they don't. And then when they go to the grocery store and they pay their rent and all that, they realize they have no money left. And it's a harsh reality, but it was designed that way to get people closer to the idea of a universal basic income. And it goes along with, think about it, they've been moving jobs out of the first world for some time to where there's really no jobs that you could think of that end in some kind of career. So that type of, system is being destroyed for people that work just enough to earn the same amount as they could also get if they decide to just not work, do drugs, get assistance. And, we're calling that a universal income, and they're implementing this in places now. It's ironic that the same places that are implementing this are also offering the idea of self-determination as an option for the world. So you could just see this is going down a really dark path. And I think these two main wars that they got, if you've noticed that, they're not so excited about Ukraine anymore. It seems like we want to focus in on the other side of the Black Sea, and that seems to be the self-fulfilling prophecy location that the three Abrahamic religions have been waiting on. And the world elite know that. They've known that for centuries. And if you think that they won't use that to manipulate the entire world to bring in a one world system, and I'm starting to see the idea over and over again, this one world system, really reminiscent of Mao, where they will label religion as poison because look how dangerous it is. And then the same thing with self-defense and freedom of speech and free thought. These things are going to be deemed so dangerous that they will be outlawed everywhere. And I think you're already seeing examples of this in the UK and other places where people say something and then they knock on the door and they come and arrest them for thought crimes.
Use a heathen, dude. You talk about doing drugs and getting free money and just hanging out all day. I called that university. But, you know, you graduate and you got to go to work. But here's the thing. I've seen a lot of the younger generation also saying, you know, I'm not going to work like this for 40 years of my life and then have to work until I'm 75 or 80 and have zero money and then not be able to retire. They're like, why even bother? That's the whole thing. See, if you're a little bit older, you drank the Kool-Aid, so you believe that that was possible. And they sucked you into the system to get that, to, you know, retire one day to sit on the beach sipping margaritas. And, you know, it kind of ended at the end of my generation, because you could see where the generation behind me was sort of into it, sort of not. You know, there were a lot more people. That's how the digital nomad and all these other things kicked off, because they just couldn't see themselves working in an office, but still they contributed to the economy and the society in general. But, you know, a gen behind them, they're like, not going to work. And then we saw the vid thing and the free money and this, that, and the other. And now you don't have to pay back student loans. And what about all those people who worked their butts off to work double time so they could get the money to pay it off? You know, it's like, talk about inequality. Those who worked hard to pay off their student loans early, that wasn't very equitable to write off student debt when I worked, not myself, but others worked double shifts to pay everything off on time or early. Because, you know, that dream of working for 40 years, then retiring and sitting on a beach somewhere, sipping margaritas, brings me to my point of those three Abrahamic religions bringing about the Armageddon and the third temple. They could only do it during this decreased magnetic field state coming up next year in October of 2024. Now, since I started the Adapt 2030 channel, I knew there was something about the food shortages inbound that was on a cycle anyway, just what the sun would do with the jet streams and reduce food production globally. And we're seeing that. Anybody who's followed me for more than a couple of years knows that I was talking about food's going to get way more expensive, way less available, and they're going to have to excuse their way out of it. And what are we seeing? Just excuse after excuse since the year 2020. And as we move forward now, the disruption in magnetic field is a twofold. First, it's going to disrupt society further because the amount of food production is going to absolutely get knocked out at the knees. So you see all these reductions from the USDA already, like 70 million more bushels down off, was it soybean and durum wheat? Russia's issuing an alert that their durum wheat is down as well. And they were supposedly going to be the ones that were going to supply the world with durum wheat this year. So if you like your pasta, go get it now, because it's going to get double price or more and maybe even not available. So if you're a pasta fan, oops, I dropped the bar of silver. That was my bad on that. And the safe places during this World War III kickoff is kind of what I've been studying today. So we know that the oil's going to get disrupted. That's part of the plan. And the reason I can tell you it's part of the plan, because I read the 50 and 50, and they were talking about gaming this out on another tabletop exercise about the food disruption on the planet here. Now, the food disruption starts with the war. And then the Straits of Hormuz get closed off and 20% of the world's oil gets stopped. Then the Suez Canal gets cut off and the goods and transportation moving across with the decrease in available oil makes that run around Africa non-doable or extremely expensive when the rest of the world's economy is contracting, because you're spending $12 to $15 a gallon on gasoline. The food prices are tripling and quadrupling, causing riots in the streets. And those that are growing food are having difficulty in what you consider like domestic security, where local communities are organizing into their own patrols, and those roads coming in and out where people would be going to markets or farmers taking produce to market become danger zones in themselves on the roads. So this has already been gamed out, man. This is just what it is going to be moving forward. Now, somewhere in there, obviously, there's a banking collapse, but I really didn't see anything about that. I was just talking strictly about oil production, in farming, fertilizers, movements to market, danger on the roads, and all these kind of things. So I started to think, all right, where would a safe place to be on the planet if you went to? And I was delving into a few articles like, where would a safe place be on the planet for World War III? And that's kind of where I started my search. And one thing that kept coming up routinely again and again, anybody that was delving into this subject, there was something that was pretty much unanimous across all of their indicators. Wherever World War II casualty and life loss was, it's going to be the exact same locations again, but it's going to be at a grander scale because there's way more people on the planet. So then I started to dig into World War II, the losses, like which countries had the biggest losses in terms of population. And then I kind of overlaid that on the Global Peace Index, and then I overlaid that with affordability of countries. And, out of that long list of, tinkering around for the day, South America, like Paraguay, Uruguay, Chile, maybe parts of Argentina, if it stays stable, were kind of my zones, because I thought, and Indonesia also, as long as you can remain there somehow on a visa. Otherwise, you look around, there's really not a lot of spots that will be considered safe during this time. So, overlay a couple of these things, and then, all those boxes get checked for being able to grow food, being in an agricultural zone, being outside the flow of what you consider strikes, whether it's a 2,000-pound ordnance drop or a nuke or whatever. There's going to be some heavy ordnance laid bare on this planet here pretty soon. But see, they need that. You hit it, Ransom, on the head here. They need to bring in this quote-unquote Armageddon to then be the overseers of the golden age. So they need to cause this fight to then end it, to them then be the controllers of the golden age, not Christ, not God, not Christ consciousness, not anything related to the divinity that you understand in terms of biblical text. They want to be the devil. They want to be the evil and the darkness and control that golden era. And that's the scary part, is they're going to try to unleash some serious evil on this planet. And then they'll come in as the false prophets to try to claim peace and golden light. The order of the golden dawn returns, and they shall be, or they think they will be, in control. And that's why tonight's episode is, we can say no. And that's the whole thing. Whether it's going to be digital IDs or CBDCs, no. And you have to worship this prophet. No, I don't. It is a false prophet. This whole thing is scripted. It is planned, like you said, hundreds of years in advance. They knew this magnetic field anomaly would occur in October of 2024. Their whole solar calendar, waiting for this moment of magnetic field disruption to take control of humanity some way, shape, or form, is all scripted. They are on a timeline. And this whole 50 and 5 is definitely part of something has sped up for them. So I was talking with Sandy Adams tonight over in the UK earlier. And she was like, tell me about Betelgeuse. It brightened and then it dimmed, and then those stars behind it, it started to lose luminescence in the star field. And she was asking me, can you explain that? And I was like, well, yeah, it was the shell coating coming off of a plasma star, the plasma sheath on the star. But they'll start to glow again once the sheath recovers and the plasma and the electrical field coming back into that, the electrical current coming back in on the star, will start to make that glow at a higher intensity where we can pick it back up visually. It's a cycle too. But I didn't really think about the cosmic ray bombardment on that. Because, higher cosmic rays do a couple of things. They cause genetic mutation. Okay. They cause what you might be considered psychic or spiritual enhancement or awareness. And they also increase cloud cover by about 7 times the normal. We're coming into a solar minimum about 3 years early. In addition to the micronova far away from here, we're talking Betelgeuse. That's quite some way away. But we're still going to get bombarded by cosmic rays. The Chinese talk about this, watching a star go dim and exploding and getting bright and then dim, and their weather changed for decades after that. Now you're overlapping cosmic ray density increases, magnetic field anomalies, which also the human becomes more angry, but the perception of reality changes also, like literally the way you see it. Like we see about 3% maybe. I'm going to be super incredible generous and say we see 3% of everything around us. The other 90%, 97% is in different spectral wavelengths of light and vibration, sound, frequency, that just things we don't pick up. But the change in magnetic field allows us to interact in a different frequency slightly, where we can see and perceive differently our world around us. So the schizoid mental ill world that we're seeing is a direct reflection of this. I really believe those people are not able to handle or don't understand or never decompress or never ground themselves for all these new energies inbound. So when they feel all this extra pressure, literal energy, whatever it might be, feelings, processing of things that make them feel like they're going insane, they don't know how to deal with the electromagnetic field change. Right. So now we got all this culminating in October of 2024. And I don't know, Ransom, how quickly do you think this thing is going to flare off and come into the what you consider nuclear weapons dropping? Do people drop their arms and return to their homes because they know that the end is in sight of some sort of great global event? And then false prophets emerge. The third temple begins construction. The cornerstone is laid. And we're supposed to believe that there'll be an era of 1,000 years of peace if you give it up to the one global governance structure, the one global economic structure, the world without borders, humanity understanding that, well, will they really understand we're all a spark of the same creation, from the creation, as a manifestation of the creator? Or are they still going to divide us amongst race lines? See, this is the whole thing they're trying to bring in, is start the global war, bring in the Armageddon, which, interpretations of the word Armageddon mean many things in different languages. It just doesn't mean the end of the world as has been taught to us. There's many. It's like breaking through the veil, the seeing, the understand. There's a huge amount of ways to interpret the word Armageddon. But at the end of that, control the end of the war, do exactly like biblical scripture, put the cornerstone of the third temple on the Temple Mount, and then try to bring in this era of a false prophet for 1,000 years of golden age light with no war, no hunger. So I'm sitting there going, So we're going to go from there to that, and how long is that going to take? Because they need to ride on top of the natural cycle to accomplish some of their goals here. So the natural cyclicity, what we're running into to reach maximum electromagnetic field disruption, will be about a year from now. It'll be, say, the 23rd or 24th of October. And I hate calling exact dates, but we're talking about planets and their alignments. So it's kind of the planets will just be there during those days. Now, will the electromagnetic field disruption start? It's already begun, but how intense will it get leading into this, and how intense will it lead and be, exiting out of it as we get in there? That's the unknowns. But I'm just saying that max intensity as the planets in their orbits sit will be around that time. So we're seeing the uptick about a year before. Do they plan for it to be a year, and they plan for the Armageddon to come in? And then, how's all this working? Because they're absolutely locking this planet down again. I sent that slide there about travel. They're making it incredibly expensive, if and available, because at a moment's notice, how many flights have canceled? It's just a cancel fest out of there if you're going to get on an airplane these days. It's a 50-50 coin toss if your plane never even leaves the tarmac. For some 65 reasons, just pick one out of a hat. Now we have this was coming off a comment of the video I did earlier today. China's telling its citizens that they have until the end of November to prepare for war. Countrywide lockdowns will follow. They won't be able to move to different locations. So whatever that might mean in itself, that was the end of the message. There's nothing more, no more conjecture on that. It just is what it was. And then we have all these idiots walking around in idiocracy that think they know everything about the world but can't, barely tie a shoe. And you're right, it is getting everybody onto a global welfare state. Now, what they're going to have an incredibly compliant population, because as the tabletop exercise comes down, and let me find this woman's name for you here again. Hold on. It came off Zero Hedge, this one. Her name is Sarah Menker, and this is out of Singapore, and this was off the New Economy Forum. And she's the CEO of Grow Intelligence, and they did this whole current food crisis exercise, and this is going to surpass 2007 and 2008 Arab Spring and make that look like that was an afternoon picnic in a park somewhere on a Sunday, apparently. And then they talk about food prices, and they're going to be coming off record highs at the moment, but they're very clean about what's driving and what will drive this next set of food insecurity. And they list it off here for you. Let me read it again. Wars, economic shock, climate change. Now, the climate change is going to be a lot to do with the electromagnetic frequency field changes. And then they go in again to the Straits of Hormuz getting cut off and the Suez Canal getting blocked off. However that happens, not sure. But anyway, man, Ransom, I know I unpacked a bunch there out of a large suitcase, but I think you're able. I think you know where my mind's moving with this.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. We that's trippy about China, because that's basically what's happening here. It's just instead of announcing and telling everybody that's what's going on, we get Bidenomics. We get high gas prices, high food prices, all of these things, which equal people not traveling. And then, of course, like you said, if any of these canals or strategic areas around the ports there in the Middle East, we know that we're going to be skyrocketing in gas prices. And what's funny is, well, I don't guess it's funny. It's more sad. But you brought up that we've been talking about this, food hike, and everybody says, hey, it's not going to happen. Look, we're not in famine yet. But if you go back to 2 years ago and listen to the shows, look how much everything has increased in prices. And not only that, we said things like that right before things kind of, getting real bad. What's going to happen is a shortage on pharmaceuticals, where this will end up creating a nation of mental illness. Not saying that we don't already have that, but imagine people freaking out because not only are they, using all their money more than they want for just to fill up their grocery tank, their gas tank and their grocery basket, but now they can't afford their meds. And some of these meds aren't psychotic medications we're talking about. We're talking about medications that different people use for different reasons. So here's an example of that. This is from Axios. I've never seen anything like this. High demand fuels drug shortages. So what they're saying is there's so much demand, there's not enough supply, and it's causing problems. And, they get into here about the ADHD drugs and behavioral health care and drugs for that. But if you look down here, high-risk diabetes patients are competing against patients with obesity for 3 drugs. And you just say this is going to get worse. So it goes through various different things. And this is just because of the way the market is. This has nothing to do with one of these other triggers setting manufacturing and delivering off. So if that happens along with the food, now you're having food problems, it's really easy to transition someone from a universal income over to a ration, because basically that's what it is. It's a ration. It's a civilization ration towards the end, and that will get smaller and smaller and be harder to use, which will give people more options that are negative, like, I don't know, volunteering for war or volunteering for, self-termination, whatever it is. They're giving people options to get out of what they're creating, which is a hellhole. We don't see it yet because we're so used to having things here in America. But if you really look at like a linear change that's happened, let's mark it in the 50s at the peak of post-war industrialization. This is a time when almost everybody in America could have one job, feed a family, have several generations going to college, own their home, own their vehicle, and also pay for groceries, healthcare, dentistry, etc., plus insurance. And, they took a lot of vacations over the next several decades. And then you mark where we're at now, and you could see that the light switch it's more like a dimmer switch, and they've been just turning it down. And civilization and unrest is going up on one end, and manufacturing, long lifespan, opportunity for people, like I was talking about before. There's not really careers that you could go to other than maintenance. And there's nothing wrong with that, because now we're in a weird time where I told my kid, you could go to college and you could get one of their little degrees, and you could probably go work for the government and get a little nice office job sitting there not doing nothing. But you're not going to make much. You're going to be making as much as the guy that also works for the city, but he goes and fixes the water main. There's no jobs. There's no place to go. So all they have a choice of is these part-time jobs that have been forced to give a higher wage that's not based on the outcome of the products they're making. So they're just replacing those with robots. And the same thing is happening across the board. And this is another, not only did we, call this demand for drugs and the shortages that'll follow, we called the higher food prices, but not just that, the fact that we're in a world right now, it's not the future, where there's robot wars going on all over the world now. They're not even hiding it, right? So we have robot wars going on the South China Sea, and tensions explode. They're shooting at each other. So there's obviously reason for people to say in China that they're getting prepared for war, because that's exactly what they're showing the world. Here's a Russian suicide drone that they're using all over Ukraine. No troops, no planes, no tanks, no nada. It's just a robot that flies over and blows up stuff, and it's extremely hard to stop. Navy launches missiles from robot boats in the Middle East. Pentagon releases video of tests from unmanned vessel that can strike with deadly precision. So we are in the culling phase, and it's not going to look anything like previous wars, and you can't depend on the media to tell you what's going on. And I think the reason that we embedded journalists, so-called journalists, in the early 90s and in 2001, and the wars that followed there, we embedded journalists so that everybody could see what we were doing when we were portraying that, there was a reason for us doing that. They had weapons of mass destruction. We had ISIS. And then at the same time funding all of the other sides of those things. But they showed us shock and awe, and I don't think the world liked it. And that's why they're not going to do it again. So now I think Twitter and, some of those websites that show things that you can't put on social media, like death and destruction, they're the only two places. So they're like the same two things going on. They're letting the world see it, but at the same time, they're hiding it from the masses. So they know only a certain amount of people are the kind of people that want to stay up to date and know what's going on, because they don't want to be bamboozled. And you have to look through all these headlines and judge it for yourself, because they get caught lying over and over and over and over and over and over again, and they get away with it. So you're supposed to believe them in the near future when they start to tell you stuff like you're going to have to deal with a little bit less power, a little bit less food. And, by the way, we're going to need one of your children. And you know what? Since we have diversity and equity, we don't mind if it's a girl or a boy. Just let us have both of your children. And, I don't know what's going to happen, but it seems like they're trying to set us up for a situation where that it incorporates decades of people that are tied up with wars, while in the background they complete their infrastructure for the complete takeover. You see, I don't know if you know who Mr. Beast is on YouTube? He's like a real famous YouTuber.
Yeah,
and
dude, he was doing the well digging over in Africa.
That's right. And that shows you exactly what happens to somebody that actually tries to do the right thing and tries to do something good. And it also, they're mad because it embarrasses some governments, because it shows you that all the governments are just wasting away all of the money they get. And with a fraction of the money, a private citizen, a private entrepreneur, a private, anybody can do these jobs way better than the government does it for you. So you have to ask the question, why isn't the government doing it? And the answer is, because they don't want you to live in a good life. They don't want you to have fresh water. They don't want you to grow healthy foods and have a long life. We're doing the exact opposite right now. So no matter who you are, if you do some philanthropy, you're probably going to be arrested. And that's exactly why they arrest people when they have soup kitchens for free for all of the needy people. And then when you really think about that, if that's going to be outlawed, but the government's going to take over it. So the government's going to give them a little bit of money and allow them to be completely addicted to what various things that are going on in the streets. And they're going to allow the homeless encampments to grow in size. And here in New Mexico, not only did the governor try to take away your right to bear arms, but they also made it illegal to remove homeless encampments that just show up on private property. So like if you go outside and there's 3 tents in your yard, you can't make them leave. You can't make them leave because you don't have private property. No, I'm not kidding you. So that's what people in Albuquerque are dealing with. Like businesses, homes, anybody that has roadside frontage, people are allowed to just come over and take it over. And then a lot of those people are from here, and they have these mental disorders, and they're on state assistance, and they take drugs. But on top of that, they take the government's drugs because they get those also, like all of the SSRI reuptake inhibitors, the famous ones that are along with the crazy people that go pew-pew all the time. And then now we have millions upon millions of people coming from South America, Central America. And now with the cherry on top, just to, set things off, we're going to take hundreds of millions of people from the Middle East where they're just being moved. You can agree with why or why not, any of that. It doesn't even matter for us. What matters is that it's becoming our problem, and the fact that they're going to ship them to Canada, the United States, all through Europe. And we've already seen 2 decades of what happens when that happens. So they are lighting the match right now for the whole powder keg to go up. And they are counting on the masses of, I'm going to say indoctrinated people of various different ideas. They are counting on them to do most of the work. So tonight's topic, you can say no, fits in perfect, because if you decide to reject their dogma of different kinds, whether or not it's the country telling you that you're bad because, you put out CO2, which is obviously preposterous, to trying to push people into holy wars. How does that benefit the planet as a whole? It doesn't. It never did, and it never will. So we can opt out. We can say no. You know what? What would happen if just 1/3 of the U.S. didn't pay their taxes one year and said, hey, we don't want war, and you keep putting in, Democrats and Republicans that do not listen to the people that they're supposed to represent. And they keep finding this out, but they don't care. So they'll just replace them with another guy. They'll say, we're sorry, and then they'll do it again. And it's been like an abusive relationship, domestic abuse from our country, but not just us. When I'm looking over at France and Italy and all of these countries over there, they are having, a fast-forwarded problem that we're about to have. It's a little bit further along. Just think about, if you want to do a neat experiment, Google a picture of the Eiffel Tower and surrounding area from 2010 or 2005 even, and now look at it now. And what you see is what looks like a disaster zone, like a war already happened, but it hasn't happened. And it will happen. And if you were any strategical person and you were playing a war game, well, you got to get your troops in certain places or there won't be a battle there. So I'm not saying that they're moving in military people, but I'm saying they're moving in people that could join a military cause at a moment's notice. And they just happen to be at the right age range, health, and all of that to take part in said conflicts in various places, mainly Europe and the United States, obviously, because those are the two targets. We have to opt out. I don't know how we're going to do that when taxation is theft. How do you figure that out? Do you just let them blow themselves up and keep paying them and then doing our own thing? It's a really hard thing to figure out, but I have confidence that America has had enough. I mean, I see evidence on both sides of the supposed political paradigm that are starting to realize, what does any of this benefit me or my children or my neighborhood or the city I live in or the state I live in or the country I live in? Any of that. It doesn't benefit us whatsoever. Nothing the government's been doing for at least a decade seems to be for us or for the human. And in fact, they've been creating laws that seems to be that they're outlawing the human condition. But you know what? If you don't want to think about that, and you don't want to be, I'm sure you saw that stuff in Brazil. Regular citizens are getting fed up.
The awakening that we've had enough. Just say no and opt out. Worked for Gandhi. Worked for Mandela. I worked many a time and brought great empires to their knees. Just say no. Talk more about this when we come back from the break. David DuByne, Ransom Godwin here. Many Ice Age Conversations. We'll see you in just a couple minutes.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
America has had it good for a long time, but I have an uncomfortable feeling that this prosperity isn't something on which we can base our hopes for the future. No nation in history has ever survived a tax burden that reached a third or more of its national income, and yet our government continues to spend more than the government takes in. Today, 37 cents out of every dollar earned in this country is the tax collector's share, and yet our government continues to spend. We haven't balanced our budget. Our national debt is bigger than all the combined debts of all the nations of the world. The U.S. gold reserves have more than 8,000 metric tons of gold. That's a value of $400 billion of gold in our treasury, and most of us don't own an ounce. $1 in 1989 has the same purchasing power or buying power as $3 today, and it's getting worse. They have voices that say the Great Reset will be our acceptance of an undemocratic socialism. Another voice says the profit motive has become outmoded. It must be replaced by the incentives of the welfare state, a universal income. Or our traditional system of individual freedom is incapable of solving the complex problems of the 21st century. They use terms like the Great Reset, say things like the Constitution is outmoded and it's an antiquated document. They define liberalism as meeting the material needs of the masses through the full power of centralized government. The full power of centralized government, this was the very thing the Founding Fathers sought to minimize. They knew that governments don't control things. A government can't control the economy without controlling people. And they know when a government sets out to do that, it must use force and coercion to achieve its purpose. That's why we must steer our own future. For the last 10,000 years at least, gold has rarely suffered from economic and political crises, as it has always been a stable. Gold is perceived as a symbol of wealth, power, and majesty. Gold has had an exalted position throughout the ages as a highly coveted, even worshipped material. That's why most every major civilization has collected and saved gold. Gold has maintained its worth and usefulness as currency throughout time and will continue to do so. Gold has an important economic role as a means of exchange should currency collapse, insurance that will protect you and your families against financial turmoil of any kind. ITM Trading is a precious metals company that has been in business for over 27 plus years with a mission to educate and empower individuals to hedge against inflation, mitigate financial risk, and prepare for the Great Reset. Schedule your free gold and silver strategy call, 866-834-1422, 866-834-1422.
That's some nastier food. Hi, I'm Chef Antonio with a quick question. What's in your food? Some of the foods these days have some pretty weird ingredients. Foods also have lots of different contaminants, from heavy metals to fungicides, pesticides, herbicides. Oh man, that's a lot of no good. Then we got the cloned food, edited food, fake food, and unhealthy foods of all kinds. That's not what mama was cooking when you were a little bambino. You want to know what's in your food. I know you do. Heaven's Harvest has Protein Booster Kit is the bolster of your daily emergency meal plan. Containing only essential proteins, beef, chicken, and eggs, stock up on vital amino acids and nutrients required to thrive in all situations. They got the fruits and vegetable buckets, the breakfast bucket kits, and for you health food nuts, they got an organics kit. Now that's knowing what's in your food. They even got the heirloom seed kit so you can plant your own food. Heaven's Harvest Heirloom Vegetable Seed Kit is a simple way to start storing seeds safely. Not sure what varieties are hardy, easy growers, which thrive and taste the best. They have taken the guesswork and time out of the process of seed saving. Now you know what's in your food because you grew it. Go to heavensharvest.com. You can save 15% at the checkout with code ADAPT.
Make the rest of the world adhere to because they're the EU. Again, just say no. I'd really love it if when that thing comes and they try to find Elon Musk for the first day, he just turns off Twitter for the entire Eurozone. Now imagine if he did that, they would scream that that was a national security risk because we can't communicate with our citizens because you turned off X. So, you can't win because, okay, well, you're making me adhere to these rules, private company. I don't want to deal it with your zone because what a champion of free speech that might be, but that would send ripples across the planet. I bet they might even rescind some of the legislation at that point. Because if X shut down across the Eurozone, they really would have no way to communicate with people because hardly anybody's using Facebook anymore. Telegram is a good one. I'll run through some Telegram channels. Sorry, I'm loading a couple mags here because we went out for the weekend. And I realized that they were empty when I was heard my dogs went running out in the middle of the field like super crazy, bolting fast, and I hadn't seen them ever do that before. So I brought a piece out with me out there, and I realized it was unloaded because we'd been playing around in the backfield this weekend. So here's what you get. Make sure all the rounds are primed and ready to go there. And maybe it's not. Maybe I'm just doing a mind experiment to see if you believe what you hear. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Maybe these are rounds dropping on the table. Or maybe it's just some candy that I got at Halloween. Maybe that's a bar of silver that's dropping on the table. Maybe it's not. Maybe it was a fork from the dinner. How is it going to be? What is reality? Can you believe what your ears hear? Can you believe what your eyes see? That's more of the question as we move into the second hour. So Revolution Radio, again, thank you. And I really mean that. If you're going to support free speech, put a donation to Revolution Radio for the running cost here, production cost, on air, website, all that goodness. And as we were going on the break, I meant to turn on my Telegram because I'll throw you a couple channels that I follow here. Because as Ransom was saying, everywhere you look, anything that's about the war, unless it's scripted, you're not allowed to show it. So Live Leak is an interesting one, but that's just, they release all kind of footage everywhere. Now there's another one, how there was who was that guy? The war movie, Lord of War. There's another Telegram channel that follows that, and it's pretty much just Ukraine and the Middle East, Gaza, Israel thing. Market news feed. They also pick up on a lot of things that are affecting prices based on troop movements and different things that have happened. Who else do we have? Oh, Geopolitics and Empire. That's a good one with Horve Morovich over there. The General, that's another good one. That comes out a little bit more on the politic. The good one called The Cradle, and this really delves into a lot of footage that gets released across things that would never be allowed on like Twitter or something like that, or Facebook. Censor Book is what we want to call that. Health Ranger, obviously, but that's more long broadcast type of things. And there's a lot of news and update channels that you can ping in on. Who else? Oh, Voices of Revelation, that's a good one too. Global Observers, that's another goodie because they focus on a lot of independent reporting. So most of what's posted on there is independent journalists giving in on the feed versus what you consider ABC, NBC, whatever. And also across the planet, they pull news feeds from everywhere. But here's the kicker. It's all independent journalists. There's none of them that are paid on the big payrolls. That's why I like that one. So anyway, Ransom, before we go on the break, the awakening that we've all had enough, because you can almost sense it in the air, that people are like, you know what? I'm done with it. I'm totally over it. And people are doing the bare minimum they can. And if you have been to a restaurant or anywhere out in public to try to get something done, you can see that barely doing anything you can to get by is the norm now. And stores are not staffing anybody. Anybody gets put in is doing the work of 3 people. It's just at the point now where society has pretty much given up on itself, and those that choose to work are doing the minimum because they know that the pay is so minimal that they're just literally breathing to stay there to get money, and they don't care what else happens across the way. So if you talk about a civilization in decline, it kind of fits a lot of things that were talked about through history. Those who study the fourth turning cycles and the actual culmination of multiples of those 80-year cycles into the 400-year cycle on the decline of empire. Hey, wait, that 400-year cycle, that matches the grand solar minimum cycle. Isn't that quirky? But anyway, talking about all these cycles, man, I'm getting thirsty. I might have to pour myself one, Ransom.
Maybe that's why they saved all our DNA, man. You think? They say it's to, investigate future crimes. And they even have a couple suing New Jersey, suing, I guess, the federal government for stealing their DNA, which puts it into a lot of people's, idea that they had a conspiracy theory that people call them crazy about. The conspiracy being that the government keeps track of every single person born and saves their DNA for whatever purposes. I don't know, baby factories, new types of human. I'm sure it's not a, Frankenstein chimera monkey that can hold an AK-47. Not this cute thing that they regurgitated through the headlines, because I'm sure you read about that years ago. The glow-in-the-dark monkeys where they put the jellyfish gene into the monkey.
Hearing about that.
Right? So they're regurgitating this like it's new news, and that they're still, back in the yesteryear of genetic research. But the truth is they can build a 90% human being that has a little bit of these other extra DNAs. And we know that. So it makes you wonder, why would they store every single person's DNA, at least in the first world? And I bet you would find out that other countries in Europe and probably Russia and China also do the same kind of cataloging. And it makes you wonder what their plans are. And, I don't think we have to wonder anymore. I think they're just going to show us. And what we were talking about, people have had enough. And that's not really a good thing, in my opinion. I mean, I guess it is. But if you think about it in this way, they have successfully pushed millions of people probably all over the world over the edge into a point of mental illness, because those people have got caught up so much in the theater that they're giving the world of drama and propaganda and all of this stuff, the theater of war, the theater of everything. It's all a theater. So I'm looking and I'm reading through the headlines, and this is when you know that world war is coming. you see stuff like this, gun ambush, top Spanish politician pewed in the face. He got pewed, no telling by who or for what, and that somebody thought it was, cool enough. And I don't know if it's me, or have you seen a series or a exponential increase in articles, studies, and otherwise other things like that are talking about reasons that you're going to have a stroke or a heart attack? Because I guess every single thing in life may give you a stroke or a heart attack. And then I put this one because this one's kind of silly. A new worry about falling and hitting your head, a higher risk of stroke. Well, I think everybody universally knew that if you fall on your head, that's not a good thing. But my point being, I have seen things that say marijuana does it, alcohol's doing it, playing sports does it, new medications, not going outside, too much sun, global warming, all of these reasons why people are all of a sudden having all these problems. And there's one thing that we can no longer debate whether it's factual or not factual. They have graphs out and, numbers from censuses around the world that the lifespan of the human being was steadily increasing throughout time. So since basically the invention of soap and hygiene and the beginnings of medical intervention, our life expectancy just shot up to almost 100 years. And before that, all the way through history, all of the different kind of humans, and we're including Neanderthal and all of them, they probably didn't live much past 30 or 35 years old. That was an old man. And then all the way in the 1800s, the life expectancy goes up, and it starts to go up towards the limit of our genes, so towards 100, 120 years old. It peaks out in most of the Western countries about 85 to 90 years old. But now you can look at every single country for the past, I think it's 4 to 5 years. America's ahead of everyone. We're ahead of everyone, and I think that's only due to a change in diet that Americans did first, and now the rest of the world is following suit. But you can see this graph, and it's just like any other graph that you would look at and just see an obvious idea happening. You see life expectancy going up, 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 and then it just nosedives, especially right around 2020. Boom, it's just heading down. So we're talking from 85 to 90 years old down to 40 to 50 years old if you're lucky. Now, I don't know about you, but I thought, we had all of these marvels of medical science that would prevent this type of thing. Matter of fact, I was just showing everybody the first official face plus eyeball transplant that they did successfully, where they took a guy's face and his eye and put it on another guy that had his face destroyed and lost his eye. The nose, the mouth, the throat, everything. And then if you see that and you know that I bet the richest people in the world have better resources than that poor guy that got his face messed up. And, when you see you talked about this last week, you see these guys hit 100 years old, right? They hit 101 years old. Then they die. But don't worry. One of their sons, they take over, right? Or some younger guy takes over the company or the foundation or whatever it is. And now I'm put in a position to look crazy because now I know that the first head transplants have happened. I know that they're growing chimera parts. I know that they can do programmable DNA. I know that they can do gene therapy. And if you read the studies about in Japan, they have found what seems to be the ability to reverse someone's age. So what they did is they messed with some genes of some mice, and if they were elderly, they got really young, and they kind of went back to a previous time in their life. But if they were young already and they gave them the same compound or did the same treatment, they got old rapidly and died fast. And I'm not saying there's a correlation there, but what I'm saying is that's proof that even on the public level, there is so much medical knowledge into the DNA field that the same people could be running things for decades now. I know that sounds woo-woo, but you can look it up yourself. There's been head transplants. Now they're moving faces to another person and with the eye and everything. This means that they could take an entire face, not just most of it, and put it on a new person and, be a different person, or have another face put on yours and continue on your life and have your power and your money and go legally change your name. And just out of curiosity, you think people that the rest of the world might be mad at after certain things take place, like if the so-called Armageddon happens, in which actually it's kind of weird because you were talking about the interpretation of that, but I believe that is a specific place on earth that they already know where it's going to happen, from translating the Bible and where that's at. And that would be, I think it's called the Hill of Megiddo, something like that. But anyway, it's also known as Golgotha Hill, where Jesus was supposedly crucifixed. And it's right there next to Jerusalem in the heart of that. So that is Armageddon. That's a place, not a time. And most biblical scholars agree on that they're talking about a location, a specific spot in which, according to the Testament, the kings of earth under demonic leadership will wage war on the forces of God at the end of history. So I don't think we're at the end of history, but one could say that the end of a history might also be just the end of an age. And which God are they talking about? Because you have to remember that, like I said, they will manipulate people's belief systems to get a certain outcome. So if they know that millions and millions and millions and millions of people are tied up with 3 or 4 books, let's just say, I don't want to, upset anybody, but 3 or 4 books that are out there that have similar origins, and they all talk about, different ways of the world turning out. One of them believes they'll be the, on top. The other one believes they'll on top. And some other people are believing, we have to have a giant big old battle, and then God will come down and intervene. And that would be nice. But let's say everybody's wrong. It's government that's actually trying to force this as a self-fulfilling prophecy. And spark everything right there. It makes you wonder, is that just a power move of some ancient families trying to take over that spot again? Because according to my knowledge and history, that's the area that has always been fought over since the beginning of writing and the beginning of factions of man. They've been fighting over that same spot. And this is just my opinion. I think it's because they came across those giant megaliths there, and everybody's, trying to own it because obviously there's something important about it. And now they have, thousands of years of dogma to make people think that they should be angry at another group of people. And this way they're going to control everybody. And if you don't think that people that aren't in it are getting involved, just look through social media. There are a bunch of people that don't even claim to be from any of these religions, yet they have an opinion on it. Yet they took a side. They put their little flag in their bio, or you could look at the other one and just think, if some war does pop off with China, because I think they're the people that need the war out of all the people in the world. So I think that fits into the worldwide plan to go ahead and get this going, because they want this one world government, and I think they're tired of waiting on holdouts. And if they can crush the Western world, then, they have a new world order. And I have a feeling that it'll be ran out of the Middle East at the center of where all of the old empires were at. Because, we've made it all the way around the world, putting obelisks and going westward. So we have to go into China for a little while. And according to all these experts, China is about to collapse. They messed up on a lot of stuff. So it would be in their best interest to use the resources they have now to prolong their collapse until they have a AI system that is a manufacturing system, and then they won't need masses of people to keep up a smaller population. And they seem to be leading the example on manufacturing. And you got to ask yourself, why isn't your Western world country making stuff? Why are all the jobs, why are all the manufacturing sent somewhere else? At the same time, they tried to dumb down the children And then the children get out of school thinking that, they're owed something, that it should be good like it was all through their growing up. And they're going to get a rude awakening when everyone finds out the end result of a communist capitalist society.
Centralized production. Like the envisioned plan of this golden era or golden age is produce it in one part of the world, ship it to another, clean up the planet, turn it into like this quote unquote utopia, and that's it. So this golden age of 1,000 years of no war, where there's no borders, no countries, one world governance, one world economy, golden era, so they claim. You can only see that it'll be centralized production in one part to try to let the earth rest. There'll be a lot less people. So when you say centralized production, it's not going to be for 8 billion people, for sure not. It's going to be for far less. And you have to think about the mistakes that were made in China during the Great Leap Forward. Now, maybe not a lot was known about biology or ecosystems at that time in the 1960s. But Mao was out in the farm fields and saw some birds eating grain when they were coming into their, we consider green revolution at that time, just like we did in the West. But if they would have let it go, China would be a completely different place than it is now. I really believe this one ecological mistake set China back 2 or 3 decades. It was called the Great Leap Forward. And a couple of things with manufacturing. Also, they try to do backyard furnaces where villages would try to produce their own steel. It's a great idea in concept. It truly is. Everything autonomous, everything within a 25 or 50-mile radius. You could produce your own steel, your own aluminum, and this sort of thing. So they tried this campaign in addition to killing all of the sparrows. Like Mao saw the sparrows eating the grain and said, those sparrows need to go. They're reducing grain production, wipe them out, and there was a bounty on every sparrow. But the crazy thing was, those open rail cars, they had rail car, we consider like brake park, or brake bulk open rail cars that go by. We're sitting there at a rail crossing and watching them go by, full of sparrows. Instead of being full of coal or lumber or, whatever it is, they were full of sparrows. That was great for the first year. There was a lot of increase in yield and everybody was patting each other on the back, and any of the scientists or ecologists of the time that said, hey, Mr. Mao, maybe we shouldn't do that, they were executed. And then the next year comes along and there were no protectors from all the predators that came in and just absolutely wiped out their crops. From A to Z, everything was just eaten to infinity. I think there was something around, the numbers are murky, between 20 million, we'll leave it at 20, some say 40, but it's in that range of 20 to 40 million people starved to death because of the lack of food production, because they wiped out the predator bird class of the entire country. And not, you were given, everybody was trying to be with the party and you were given accolades, and the more sparrows that you had, and you organized the town community to bang pots and pans until the sparrows got so tired they just fell out of the sky. And that kind of, programs. Now, if they had not had that famine and their green, revolution had moved forward, they would have kept up with the United States. They would have kept up with the West, because they were advancing in different types of technologies for growing food and thing. But all those people just got wiped out. So then what happened? Then there was a lot of political payback, a lot of infighting. Fingers had to be pointed. People had to be blamed. And then that cascaded into the whole Red Guard and that whole chapter of history, as we know, the Cultural Revolution. Because there were a lot of smart people saying, we can directly point to who caused all of this. Those were the people who knew how to read and write. And they could put 2 and 2 together and make a logical story, like me and Ransom. Like me and Ransom in the Cultural Revolution in China, we would have been for sure in a prison camp at the minimum. they would have been a re-education camp for Ransom and Mai's sideways thoughts on that. But that whole thing about the backyard furnace, they're trying to push us back. And the thing that really gets to me is they are trying to repeat the same mistakes globally that were already repeated in the 60s and 70s in China. Like they want us to go back to doing everything local again. I get it. But the efficiency gains in a centralized location with the best technology is going to far surpass anything that's done on a local level in terms of like steel smelting and rubber production and rubber recycling and aluminum smelting and all these things. But they're trying to distribute the power around, so there's not going to be enough power for these centralized production facilities to operate. Now, it's cool to grow your own food, but how many people are able to raise cattle? You're not. That's the whole thing, is if they want you to come back to centralized production again, it's easier for one farmer to run 100 head than it is for each person to have 1 head of cattle on their land. That's the thing in efficiencies, because one person gets incredibly efficient at doing that at scale. And try to grow grains too. Are you going to have a family put out like 100 square feet of wheat, 100 square feet of corn, 100 square feet of millet, 100 square feet of buckwheat, 100 square feet of this? Like the amount of time to do that for one family on one plot of land? Or are you going to have a farmer over there grow 10 acres of corn and run it with a machine versus having you down there with the spade and the shovel, and maybe hopefully you have a rototiller and maybe some petrol with that, or maybe not. But that is where they're trying to take us back to. They're trying to reverse us back into the Great Leap Forward again on a global level. It failed once. It's failing again. People are seeing through the greenwashing as well. Like, look out right now, like how many wind projects have been canceled because of funding, and also not in my backyard. You're killing the whales, bro. The seals are going away. I don't know what happened to the dolphins. Turtles aren't there anymore. You got the cavitation in the water, ultra low frequency. Bro, you're disturbing everything. It can't happen. Plus, it's not reliable. Generation capacity is only good for certain parts of the year. Obviously, when winds move faster, spring and fall. But you can see how all this mechanism is, in my opinion, from the known past, moving us into the same exact sets of circumstances to set us up for failure. Because I'll come back to it. I'm not a fan of pollution. I'm not a fan of contaminating our environment. I'm not a fan of dumping chemicals in our rivers and streams and polluting our waterways and poisoning our ecosystems. I am 0% fan of that. Not at all. There's many ways to dispose of that now clean, but it costs money. But in terms of scale and production at scale, they're trying to take us back into the agrarian, minimalist, barely produce. And if you get hurt as a single family farmer, you don't grow the food. It literally means if you get injured while you're producing the food, you can't grow the food. And that's the same with what Ransom was alluding to earlier. They moved all these jobs, they offshored them over to, like, Foxconn's a good example. They make your computer parts and everything's made, but, they lock the people in the factories over there. And once they do get to go home for, like, let's say Chinese New Year, you're done. Like, once you stop working, you have no more revenue or income coming in. Like, that's it. They're meager hourly wage jobs that once you don't show up for that next hour, you get zero pay. Well, the same thing would be included to try to force everybody back to the family subsistence level farm, and you produce what you grow on your own land. You hurt yourself, you break a leg, you cut your hand deeply, you're done producing food for a minute. And that is the difference between getting planted on time, maintaining the garden, getting on a pest control schedule, into the harvest, an enormous amount of things. I've learned how difficult it is to actually grow food. These last 3 years out here doing it all the time. You miss a week of something, you get busy, and you come back, and everything, the mechanics of it has all changed. You either got produce laying on the ground that you didn't get and you got wasted, or you got everything eaten and you're way behind and you got 1 billion Japanese beetles infested everything, or you got moth caterpillars, you got the green caterpillars, you got tobacco hornworms somewhere. I don't know, man. There's a million things that can go wrong. You got squash bugs. You miss your maintenance schedule or pruning or thinning to get airflow through, and your entire crop for that time is ruined. Like this year, we missed on the front part of the orchard, bending our third-year apple trees, bending the branches over, and using agricultural tape to bend them over using pieces of real thin bamboo, and they would have produced more fruit had we bent them down. But we missed that schedule, so when it came into flower, it got real cold. A lot of the blossoms were frozen, but we just didn't get the remaining branches pulled down enough, so we got minimal fruit production. We just got busy, so we missed that 2-week period of them coming into blossom when we could have stretched the branches down to get them to fruit off a bit better. I mean, there's like a million, and if you're hurt, that's when we're completely healthy, and we missed all of that. And we have machinery, and we have abundant access to fuel and fertilizer and adjuvants for the soil. And we still missed. Now you get hurt real bad, you're not growing a thing. So Ransom, everything keeps pushing us back to this agrarian lifestyle with this whole quote unquote, it's green, live with the earth, etc. I get it. But they're trying to railroad the entire society into this, reduction of quality of life, reduction of economy, reduction of goods and services, reduction of available foodstuffs. They're pushing us back into the Great Leap Forward. I believe that's but the closest I can get it, but on a global level. Switzerland and Basel and Geneva, they're going to be fine because that's where the elite park their money. But for the rest of the planet, they're pushing you back into 1960s China is where they're pushing you back into. So anyway, I know, again, I've unboxed a lot there, so I'll leave it as is.
Yeah, it's kind of weird how this came in phases, right? They shut down, like, if you remember all the way back in the 90s, not that far back, it doesn't seem like, but that was like, I think the last decade in America where you could actually go to any store, anywhere USA, and there was a hardware store, there was probably a bakery, probably even a cobble guy that fix your shoes, all of this stuff was there. Now I only have one choice. Like me personally, I'm sure if you live in a bigger city, there's more shopping choices. But when you go there, you realize that none of the products come from here. None of it. It's all from somewhere else. So what happens when all of these shipments stop coming due to no more traveling in the world because of different conditions that they're creating? Well, things start wearing out. Your clothes start wearing out. Like, just for an example, we were talking about storing all of this stuff last week as far as food. But I've ordered, I don't know how many jeans because I don't like the ones they sell at the store. So I order stuff that I like to wear. And when I get it looks like jeans were back in like 90s or whatever that you would buy from different stores, but they don't last. You wash them 3 times, you work in them twice, and then the knee busts out and the material has disappeared. And so I'm picturing this weird situation that America may be in where everyone looks homeless. And the reason I say that is because when I go out shopping, I've noticed that there's literally no standard of living anymore for people. Like, these are regular middle-class people that you cannot tell the difference from the guy that's asking for money on the corner. And not only that, they're on the same drugs. You could see it on their faces. You could see it on their behavior. So it's going to become harder and harder for and I don't want to say traditional because people always, attack that idea, but just the regular, basic human family structure. Because you can't take your kids out to a store where there's people passing out and the cops are beating on somebody because they were shoplifting. And, there's 40 guys from the door of the Walmart to the edge of the highway that are asking for money. And you're like, oh, well, you look at the sign and you feel bad. And you're like, oh, wow, he's just down on his luck and he's out of gas. But for some reason, he's been out of gas for the past 6 months. For some reason, he's been out of food and just needing help for the last 6 months. And Phoenix just removed 500 people from a tent city and put them in a facility. Now, I don't want to get too crazy here, but if this trend continues, you remember I was talking about they've been building massive prisons and big facilities to deal with the influx of people, but that can easily change its purpose once built. Just like any other government agency or program, once initiated, it never goes away. Never. It always continually takes a piece of the pie, and that puts you in the idea of your government's going to eventually bust just due to programs and different things that they continually spend money on. None of it makes our country money. None of it's for the benefit of our country as a whole or any citizen in it. So you got to wonder, if they're building facilities and more people have nowhere to work and more people are late on their mortgage and on their car payment. And more people are pawning their inherited wealth in the form of different things like jewelry and et cetera, coins and guns. All this stuff's getting sold and going into the system. And for example, I know for a fact a neighborhood I've been paying attention to was once owned. Each individual lot was owned by a family who owned their home there. They weren't that great of families. We're talking like some late 70s Adobe construction, small houses, but they were owned by a family and they had a yard and somebody grew up there and made memories and moved away from there. But nowadays they're knocking them down. And you see every single lot is either for rent or owned by the bank and they're trying to sell it. And someone is buying that property, whether it's a finance institution, which is mostly what's going on. There's become fewer and fewer homeowners that are going out to buy a home. And I found that interesting because we have this fad now where people are choosing not even to try to rent or to try to buy a home. Instead, they're trying to live in their vehicles, which we all know that they're going after the vehicles by themselves because they're gas guzzlers. They're bad for the planet. You can't be traveling all over everywhere, even though you can't really anymore in the world because it's, so horrible to travel there. Plus, they don't want you there when you get there. We have travel advisories everywhere. And you sent me this slide from Reventure, income needed to buy a house. And it shows that same slide that mirrors, guess what, disease and life expectancy, right? So it goes up. This is at the point where life expectancy starts going down, and the amount of money to own a home and run a home, because this isn't even about running the home. This is just affording the home, right? Income needed to afford a house, $111,000. Yeah. And I don't know too many people that could come up with that and go buy a home. So they're stuck in the position of increasingly less jobs, no way to get out of the poverty situation that we can call Bidenomics, because that's what it is. There's nowhere to go. Nobody's making anything. Everything's bought from overseas. So at which point, even without the wars, even without some of these other triggers that they're using, you can see that this is going to collapse. We just can't do it. And even if you are doing it, do you want 40 people living in your front yard that don't help you, but yet they're draining off of your electricity? They're in your driveway. They're on the sidewalk. Your kids have to go places. There's people passed out. They're dying. It's just becoming a weird situation. And you can look at anywhere USA, from the small town to the large city, and you're going to see an increase in tent cities, drug addicts, and people that don't live anywhere. They're just walking around. We're joked because I live in a place called Walker Town, and the people that are walking around in Walker Town look like the Walking Dead. So we're like, shh, there's a walker. They're out all night. And now they've I've realized like there's nothing like there used to be. No mom and pops. All you have is convenience, truck stops, Walmarts, and the big box chains to do stuff. So as soon as Home Depot and a couple of these other companies kind of stop selling so much stuff for the regular guy to fix up his property, you're just going to see all of the properties decline and the banks buy up everything. And I think that's the outcome. That'll be, you ask how long, when the banks own a certain percentage of all the properties, that'll be in which they will initiate universal income and rationing. And I don't want to see that future. So I don't know what to tell people, but something definitely has to change. And I hate to say go vote, but I think that's the only way to take care of it is at the local level and your local government with local people that you tell them, no, we're not doing that. We're not selling out to these agendas that make it hard for people to live. We want business to come here. And then look at the social aspect of all of the culture war that's making it harder and harder for people to even work in, institutions because you might say the wrong thing, or maybe you posted something when you were a teenager. We're so old now that people are being fired for things they posted when they're teenagers. It makes me feel old anyway.
Yeah, there has to be a statute of limitations on something like that, really. Because what was acceptable in society 20 years ago might not be considered acceptable now. But for sure, and I think if you'd penned a letter in the 1990s where you actually had to type it and then mail it into a newspaper and then they could reprint it for you. But if your name was on something that you penned in like 1992 that got published, that's now on microfiche somewhere, microfilm, and they point to your thoughts back in the 1990s that you wrote on some 35 years ago, and they're like, well, that doesn't agree with today's standards. Well, bro, statute of limitations. There's a lot of things that are, at least you could use statute of limitations. That's just through the regular law. Like if committing murder is 25 years. If they don't catch you within that time, you're free. Okay, but you posted a tweet 30 years ago, now you lose your job. There's some absurdity in the whole thing. But you ask how we can come through this. I'm going to share two stories with you. Levi Strauss, these two partners, Levi and then Strauss, the blue jean persons, as you referenced. Originally, that was tent material that they were trying to sell to the gold rush and the gold miners out in California in 1849, 50, 51. So they had this really hardy material that they thought every single gold miner would buy and then use it as lean-tos and tents. But they didn't, because when it got wet, it got real heavy and it wasn't really waterproof to the point that they wanted it, and they ended up not being able to sell it for what they thought as tent material. So they had to pivot. And that pivot for them to still stay in business and fulfill a need was to get that incredibly hard material and turn it into jeans and overalls for those that were out in the mining camps and panning and in the gold mining frenzy. And you can see how that turned around. They could have packed up and walked away and sold all that fabric for like 2 cents and been like, all right, I don't know what to do. We're going to start over. But, when you come up to these difficulties, you might have to sit back for a minute and reassess. Because I don't know exactly how long it took those two guys to sit around in California when things were incredibly expensive. It was the most expensive place to live in the United States, far above New York prices, out in California, because there were so many people there that needed so many services. And the famous example is it was cheaper to have your dirty laundry sent on a ship over to China, washed, repackaged, and sent back on a ship than it was to wash it in town or have somebody wash it in town. That's how absurd the prices were. So to sit around out there going, wait, we can't sell our tent material, I wonder how long it took them to pivot. Probably not long, because I had to think of a different option and under duress quickly. And then another one. in the 1950s and 60s, we sat during the Cold War. And all those companies and guys that had what they called steam shovels back then, backhoes now, they were digging all those holes to build bunkers. Well, the Cold War ended, and then the same people with the same excavating equipment turned out to be the leisure backyard pool builders of the 1970s and 80s. Again, they had to pivot. So the Cold War ends. Nobody's buying a bunker anymore, dude. That's so 1950s B-52 style. You got to be kidding me. I can't even think of. So they're going to dig out the pools, and they had all the concrete and access to concrete. So they just repurposed a hole they dug in the ground. This is the way I think we're really all going to need to think moving forward, is when we come up toward one set of obstacles, we're just going to have to reassess it. And whatever you sit in life situation, product, service, going to have to repurpose that. But how many people are able to think so far out of the box that you could actually change as much as Levi Strauss or the pool builders of the 1970s, previously bunker builders? But what's so interesting is the bunker builders are now the pool guys that have pivoted to build bunkers now. So think about that little 50 years of time. Moved out of the Cold War, you're building swimming pools, everybody's a pool builder, and now suddenly all the guys who have the equipment to blow shotcrete and get all that stuff done are now the ones that are digging all the bunkers and have gone away from swimming pools because there's no need. People aren't building pools anymore to the level they were 20 years ago, and now these are the main constructors of multi-level bunkers and luxury bunkers for those who want to bug out or bug in or bug under. What would you call going down into a bunker? A bug under, maybe? Bug in for sure, but your options in some sort of things too. Like last night, for my example, went outside and I came inside earlier and I had an interview with Craig Simpson. We talked for a couple hours because he was over in Somalia in the early 90s and he was stationed over there. And we were talking about when a society collapses, what happens. And he was telling me quite a few things about food distribution and water, and having solar panels on your roof makes you a target, and areas to look out for when you're going into markets and this sort of thing, and like how gangs would be ruling the day in the cities and just things like this. So I go outside about maybe 2.5 hours later, and I smelled smoke everywhere, and I'm like, that is a huge amount of smoke. That's not like somebody burning their debris or brush in the front yard, and it's sure not from somebody trying to heat their home. I knew it was a forest fire, and suddenly my spidey sense kicked in, and I'm like, I walked way to the far edge of my property and scanned in the forest for any kind of glowing to see if there was fire near. And instantly I just started to think, like, what do I need to get out of the house right now? That was my very first thought. What do we need to get out of the house right now? Before I even assessed to look out, I ran out to see if there was a fire. But as I was walking out in the field, I was like, if I see any glowing, dogs are getting out. We need our papers. We need this kind of stuff. Pivoting. What if you have to leave your bug out spot? You plan to bug in, but then something comes like forest fire or an invading army or gangs or something, and you got to bug out. Like, you need to pivot. And I think that's more to the realization here, Ransom, is that, things we might think are locked in stone in ways of thinking how it might be the future. We might have to pivot on those plans too. Because that's what Craig was telling me. They'd have a plan, and they would like go into this part of the city, and they would be distributing goods. But suddenly, a gang would come rocking up, and they would get. He didn't really talk about firefight too much, but he just said then they would have to lock down the place, and they would have to try to forcefully make those marauders go away because they were coming in to steal the food, and they were all armed. And he was just trying to say, like, you know, the best laid plans would go out of the window in about a fifth of an eighth of a second. Like, you have your initial plan, but then what? And that's the same thing that we're all going to experience. And I've noticed that too. Like, think about those people over in Gaza, like walking out through a corridor now with just one bag, and your hands above your head carrying one bag, and that's all you can take with you. But you had a house full of stuff days ago or weeks ago. Now you can leave with a single bag. Like, what would you take with you? Are you prepared to drop everything and walk away? And if you are, then what is the most important thing? You know, think about that for a second. If your house caught on fire and it's really on fire, like you have one trip into the house to grab something and one trip out. And after you leave that, then there's nothing else left. You can't get back in again. That's an incredible mind era changing type of mind frame to live through. Because I think living in and relishing change and being able to exist in a constant state of change is going to be the new waking state. Because most of us have grown up in a time of stability where things remained, I'm going to say, more constant. We lived in a time of constant. We lived in a time of little change, an enormous amount of stability that you thought was going to last forever. But we have definitely crossed that Rubicon where we've switched over and it's crossed. And we're now living in a time of flux and change. And the only thing I can say is I'm so glad that I got to travel when I was younger, because traveling teaches you a lot about yourself. And plans that were laid, I tell you, they often would go wrong, or things would be closed, or you missed buses, or the transportation wasn't there, the train wasn't coming. You had to pivot consistently and constantly while you're traveling. And if one thing taught me that, A, how to conserve money, B, how to find shelter, how to find restaurants, look for things that you never thought, like you get to a place, you missed the connecting, you don't know anything about this town, and you need to find a place to stay. You need to find a safe place to stay, and you need to get some food, and you need to learn the transportation to get out of there the next day. Like on the fly, literally, within a 2-second realization that I don't even know the name of the town I'm in. Now I need to go find a hotel, or I need to get a guest house or something like that. I need to find a bed for the night. Like a couple places we turned up in India, they're having festivals. They didn't know that. But there were 0, 0, 0 hotels. Not a single place. We had to end up like finding families that would take us in for the night. You know, this kind of things taught me so much of being able to live in consistent and constant change. And some people might say, well, you wasted your life traveling. You didn't get the job. You didn't get the career. And I look back going, bro, I'm so glad I traveled, because look, you got the career and all that stuff. We're going into World War, and your house is getting repossessed by the bank. And you're the one who was saying I should have stayed back and like stuck in an office for 50 hours a week instead of going off and trekking around the Himalaya. Come on, man. But anyway, I don't know, Ransom, do you think that we are going to have to be, the mind frame change, I think, is going to be the biggest thing, and finding the opportunity and the danger and the opportunity in the thing that you never thought was possible, where your opportunity actually shifted. It's no longer there, and you have to turn right, turn left, go straight up, straight down, whatever, but you're not going forward. You're going to have to pivot on a dime. Like how many people have that skill, do you think?
I don't know. I don't even know if I have that skill. However, I did already plan for it. I've always planned for it. Hopefully I'll never have to worry about it. But that just seems like, having a pew-pew. You hope you're not going to need to do certain scenarios, but you might have to. I have bags just for that reason, what you said. I'm grabbing that bag. I'm leaving with that bag. That's all I'm taking. What's in there is what I got. There are no personal possessions or trinkets or keepsakes or none of that. I would advise people to maybe, if you really want to have some, trinkets that you want to take with you, that's a good idea kind of for a mental state. So you might want to have a folder of your best photos or something like that, really near. But you should be acting like that anyway. What if your house caught on fire? You might have to just run in there and grab a few things, and that's all you get. You should already have a backup plan for any scenario. scenario that involves that. And right now I'm showing the Washington Post, nation at risk of winter blackouts as power grid remains under strain. And we're going to continue to see stuff like that. So a lot of people are going to get to practice this idea, but hopefully we won't get to a point where you do just have to grab one bag that has everything you need in it. And each member of your family member should have their own bag. And you should be able to, do the ancient Buddhist philosophy and, attachment is suffering. So if you could just drop your phone and unattach to all these things that you think you're going to have forever, which you're not, those things are temporary. And once you understand that, you should be able to walk away and go, do whatever we do. And speaking of that, there's a new theory out now that the dinosaurs did not die from the rock that hit the planet, but instead they just died from a big dust plume that just hung out over the earth for a long time. And I want to remind people that can happen at any time. That can happen from a volcano, and it makes you wonder why there's crazy billionaires out there trying to put their own dust in the atmosphere. Just think about that. They're trying to do exactly what's caused extinctions in the past. Sounds silly to me. There it goes.
No, it's not, because you got to think, if there was that much dust in the atmosphere, the plant life would go first. Then the smaller meat sources would go second. And they would just slowly fade out as everything they relied on for sustenance got suffocated out. As soon as the sunlight came back, the plants would start again. So would that web of life without the large creatures. Perhaps the pygmies are going to be the ones that live through this, as the 6'4" tall guy here needs more food. Bye for now. DuByne, Ransom Godwin, signing off.